Hi, this is Stories at Work. Today we're breaking down a dramatized story from the world of corporate governance, compliance, and internal investigations. The one where a gift from a female CEO on my birthday turned out not to be a thoughtful gesture, but an insurance policy in case of betrayal. My birthday landed on a Tuesday, the kind that usually slips by with a couple of polite Slack messages and a grocery store cupcake I pretend I don't care about. I got to the office early anyway. That's what I did when life felt noisy. Show up before everyone else, make coffee, straighten my desk, and let the routine convince me I had control. Our building was all glass and brushed steel, the sort of place where people whispered about alignment like it was a religion. I worked in risk operations, nothing glamorous, mostly approvals, access requests, vendor invoices, and the quiet job of noticing patterns nobody noticed. By 9, the floor filled up with the usual soundtrack, badge beeps, keyboards, and someone laughing too loud near the pantry because they wanted to be heard. "Happy birthday, Mason," my teammate Suri called out, sliding a sticky note onto my monitor like it was a gift receipt. She'd drawn a tiny cake and wrote, "Don't let them work you to death." I smirked. "I'll try not to die on company time." She tilted her head toward the corner office suite. "You've got a meeting at 10. With her." I didn't ask who her was. Everyone in the company had one her. CEO Callista Vane. In a place like ours, the CEO wasn't just a title. She was a weather system. People tracked her mood like a forecast. If she smiled in the hallway, departments suddenly got budget approvals. If she frowned during an all-hands, somebody's manager mysteriously moved on to new opportunities by Friday. I'd seen her up close maybe 3 times in 2 years, always controlled, always kind in a way that felt measured, like she'd practiced it in a mirror. At 10 on the dot, my calendar chimed. I walked past rows of desks where people tried not to stare, past HR, where the lights were always too bright, past compliance, where people drank coffee like it was medication. Outside the executive suite, a security guard I'd never seen before stood near the door, hands folded in front of him. Not a lobby guard, not the usual smiling contractor. A quiet, professional kind of guard. He looked at my badge, then at me, then nodded once. That alone made my throat tighten. Inside, the air smelled like citrus and money. A receptionist gave me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Hale," she said softly, "she's expecting you." I followed her to a conference room instead of the CEO's office. Glass walls, a single leather chair at one end, a neat folder placed dead center on the table like a prop. And then Callista Vane walked in. No entourage, no assistant, no performance. Just her in a dark blazer, hair pinned back, face calm enough to make you forget she could end careers with one sentence. "Mason," she said, and the fact she used my first name hit me harder than it should have. "Ma'am," I answered automatically because my body still thought titles could protect you. She smiled, small, controlled. "Sit." I sat. She didn't. She looked at me for a moment like she was weighing something, not on a scale, but in her head. Cost. Benefit, risk. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box, matte black, no logo, no ribbon. She placed it in front of me with 2 fingers. "Happy birthday," I stared at it. "You didn't have to." "I did," she cut in, gently but final. Silence filled the room in a way that made my ears ring. I forced a half laugh. "This is unexpected." "Most important things are," she said, and then she finally sat across from me, hands folded, posture straight. I touched the box, almost afraid it would set off an alarm. It was heavier than it looked, not heavy like a watch, heavy like hardware. "May I?" I asked. "Not here," she said. That snapped my eyes up. "Not here?" She leaned forward slightly, voice lowering just enough that it felt like a secret. "Take it home. Open it somewhere private, and if anyone asks what I gave you—" She paused, held my gaze. "You tell them it was a book." My mouth went dry. "A book?" "Yes." I tried to read her expression, but it was like trying to read a locked screen. Why me? I asked. Because curiosity is a reflex when fear doesn't know where to go. Callista's eyes softened almost. Because you do your job, quietly, correctly, and you don't gossip. I wanted to believe that was praise, but praise from someone like her never came without weight attached. A knock interrupted us. The door opened and our general counsel stepped in. Ilya Brent, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He didn't look surprised to see me. That was worse than surprise. "Callista," he said. Then his gaze flicked to the box. Just a flick. But he saw it. Callista didn't move. "Ilya, we're finishing." He held his stare on her for half a second too long, then nodded. "Of course." When the door closed, I realized I'd been holding my breath. Callista stood. "One more thing." I looked up. She slid the folder across the table toward me. The kind of folder our legal team used when they wanted something documented without putting it in an email. "Read the first page," she said. I opened it. It wasn't a report. It wasn't a contract. It was a single page with a heading, Custody Acknowledgement. Under it, my name, my employee ID, and a line that made my stomach drop. The undersigned confirms receipt of the enclosed item and agrees to maintain it in personal custody until further instruction. I looked at her. "This is for the gift." Callista didn't deny it. "Sign it?" I swallowed. "I don't understand." "You don't need to," she said. "You just need to do it clean." My hand hovered over the pen. My brain ran through every risk checklist I'd ever learned. Unknown object, legal documentation, executive secrecy, counsel awareness, security presence. This wasn't a birthday. This was a transfer, and I was being used as the delivery route. "What happens if I don't?" I asked, because I needed to know I still had choices. Callista's voice stayed level. "Then I find someone else." I waited for a threat. It didn't come. Just a statement of procedure. I signed. The moment I did, Callista exhaled like she'd been holding something in her chest for days. She took the folder back, tucked it under her arm, and looked at me with a steadiness that felt almost human. "Go straight home," she said. "No bar, no dinner, no stopping." I nodded slowly. "Okay." "And Mason?" "Yes?" Her eyes didn't blink. "If you hear my name in the wrong kind of conversation this week, you walk away." I stood, box in my hands, and for the first time in my adult life, I understood what it felt like to be handed something you couldn't put down. I left the executive suite with my heart beating too hard for a man carrying a book. Suri raised her eyebrows as I passed my desk. "How'd it go?" I forced a smile. "Fine." "Did she give you a raise?" "No," I said, almost laughing. "Then what did she—" "A book," I answered, and hated how quickly the lie came out. At home that night, I shut my front door, set the black box on my kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time before I touched it again. I opened it carefully. Inside wasn't a watch. Inside wasn't a pen. It was a small metal drive case, sealed, with a tamper strip, and a single label printed in clean block letters. "If anything happens to me, do not give this to HR." And that was just the beginning. I didn't sleep. Not because I was excited, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that label again. "Do not give this to HR." At 2 a.m, I'd walk the drive case from my kitchen table to the bedroom, then back again, like changing rooms would change the truth. By 4, I finally did what Callista clearly expected I'd do. I stopped treating it like a mystery and started treating it like a risk item. I didn't plug it into my work laptop. I didn't even touch my personal laptop. Instead, I pulled an old spare machine from my closet, something I hadn't used in years, wiped it, took it offline, and sat at the table with a notebook like I was about to study for an exam. Because that's how you survive corporate chaos. You don't panic. You document. You isolate. You control variables. The drive case had a simple latch. Inside was a flash drive. No brand, no markings. Just one more label. Custody. M. Hale. Date. Tuesday. My hands felt colder than the room. I plugged it in. A single folder opened on the desktop, no maze of files, no confusing names, just one directory, titled Vein/Contingency. Inside were three things: a PDF called Board Brief, Restricted, a zip folder called Evidence Pack, a short text file called Read First. I opened the text file. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was written like someone trying to stay calm while their house burned. It said, "If you are reading this, it means I'm being forced out or neutralized. Do not contact my assistant. Do not contact HR. Do not contact security. Assume their channels are compromised. You were selected because your role gives you plausible access to process logs, and because you have a pattern of keeping your mouth shut. Your job is not to save me. Your job is to prevent them from rewriting the record. Follow the steps exactly. Timing matters. You are not alone." The board has a line into this. At the bottom was a list of steps and one name: Ilya Brent, General Counsel, not safe. My stomach tightened so hard it felt like hunger. Ilya Brent. The same man who'd walked into the conference room and glanced at the box like he already owned it. I stared at the screen and realized something ugly. Callista wasn't asking for help. She was preparing for betrayal. I didn't open the evidence pack yet, not because I lacked curiosity, because once I saw what was inside, I couldn't unsee it. And if something happened to me, I didn't want my first mistake to be ignorance with fingerprints. So I did something boring, procedural, and unromantic. I verified timestamps. I copied the entire folder to an encrypted container on the same offline machine. Then I copied that container to a second flash drive I owned, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote the date on it in thick black mark. Then I hid it behind the refrigerator kickplate, like I'd seen in some old crime show, and hated myself for thinking in cliches. By 7:30, I was in the shower trying to convince my face to look normal. By 8:30, I was back at my desk with a coffee that tasted like cardboard. Suri glanced at me and frowned. "You look like you got hit by a truck." "Didn't sleep," I said. "Birthday hangover." I let out a sound that might have been a laugh, something like that. Our office was already humming. People were louder than usual in that artificial way that tells you gossip has oxygen. I logged in, opened my ticket queue, and tried to act like I was thinking about vendor onboarding. Then my manager called me. Not a chat message, not an email, a call. That was unusual enough to raise my pulse. His name was Darian Koss. He was the kind of manager who used phrases like optics and narrative more than results. He smiled a lot, rarely said anything concrete, and always seemed to know what was happening before it happened. "Mason," he said, voice friendly. "You got a minute?" "Sure. Swing by my office." I muted my mic, exhaled once, and stood up. As I walked toward his glass-walled office, I noticed something else. Two people from security standing near the elevator bank, talking quietly. One of them was the same guard from yesterday. The moment I met his eyes, he looked away. Darian waved me in and shut the door. He didn't offer a chair. He didn't sit either. That told me everything. He leaned against his desk, hands clasped, like he was about to deliver a coaching moment. "So," he said, stretching the word, "how was your birthday?" "Fine. Any surprises?" My throat felt tight. "No." Darian smiled gently. "Interesting." He didn't say more for a beat, letting silence do the work. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small white envelope, plain, no branding, and held it between two fingers like it was a dead insect. "We've been asked to do a little process check," he said. "Routine, nothing personal." My chest tightened. "Process check on what?" "Executive interactions," he said smoothly. "Gifts, perks, potential conflicts. You know how it is." I stared at the envelope. Darian kept smiling. "So if anyone gave you anything, you'd declare it, that's all." I thought of Callista's face. "If anyone asks, you tell them it was a book." I heard her in my head again. "Do not give it to HR." Darian angled the envelope toward me. It's just a form. Quick signature. I didn't move. What's in it? I asked. Standard language, he said. Disclosure, compliance, cleanup. My pulse thudded. This wasn't compliance, this was containment. And Darian wasn't improvising. He knew. I forced myself to breathe slower. I didn't receive anything that needs disclosure. Darian's smile thinned. Come on, he said softly. We're all adults. This isn't a trap. The second he said it, I knew it was a trap. Because no one ever says this isn't a trap unless it is. I held his gaze. If you need something from me, put it in writing. Darian paused. Then his tone shifted just a fraction. Still polite, but colder underneath. Mason, he said, I'm trying to protect you here. Protect me from what? He gave a small sigh, like I was being difficult on purpose. From being in the wrong place at the wrong time. My stomach dropped. Is something happening with Callista? I asked, keeping my voice controlled. Darian's eyes flicked to the glass wall, then back. You don't need to worry about executive matters. That was a yes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. All I need, he said, is your cooperation. You tell me if she gave you anything unusual. You hand it over, and this becomes a non-event. My mind ran through Callista's message. Timing matters. If I handed anything over, the record would be rewritten before it ever reached daylight. I looked at Darian and realized something else. He didn't look angry. He looked confident, like he knew how this story ended. I didn't get anything unusual, I repeated. Darian held my gaze for a long, tense beat. Then he smiled again, wide this time, but empty. Okay, he said, that's your answer. He opened the door for me like a host. As I stepped out, he added almost casually, just keep your calendar open this week. There may be some schedule adjustments. I walked back to my desk with my hands steady and my stomach hollow. Suri looked up. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Because in a corporate crisis, the first person you lose is the one who admits they're afraid. I sat down, opened my inbox, and saw a new email at the top. No subject line, just a blank header, like someone didn't want it searched. Sender, HR Operations. The message was one sentence. Please report to conference room 9 at 11 for a routine review. Below it was a calendar invite, already accepted on my behalf. I stared at it, then slowly looked toward the elevator bank. The security guard was still there, watching, and I realized I'd just been given my own deadline. That night, I stopped being the guy who waited for permission. I opened a new document, wrote down every detail I could remember from the last 24 hours. Times, names, locations, exact phrasing, and saved it in 2 places. Then I checked one more thing because I couldn't help myself. I pulled up the internal access request system and searched for my name. There it was. A ticket created at 6:30 that morning. Requester, Ilya Brent. Reason, temporary review of Mason Hale's system access and communications. And just like that, my birthday gift stopped feeling like a secret. It started feeling like a target. By 10:30, my stomach felt like it had been replaced with a block of ice. I kept my face calm anyway. I answered 2 tickets. I nodded at a passing analyst. I even forced a small smile when someone joked about cake in the break room. But my eyes kept drifting to the clock and the elevator bank. At 10:42, my access hiccuped, not fully cut, just delayed. A page took longer to load. A system that usually authenticated instantly made me re-enter my password. A small, subtle friction you wouldn't notice unless you lived inside these tools every day. That wasn't random. That was someone putting their hand on the valve, testing how fast they could close it. I opened my notes and added a line. 10:42. First friction event. Then I did the one thing I knew would matter if things went sideways. I made my work objective and boring. I started exporting what I was allowed to export. Standard audit reports, access request histories, ticket logs tied to my role. Nothing classified. Nothing that would scream, the employee is stealing data. Just routine exports that any risk ops analyst could justify as weekly reconciliation. I named the files with today's date and my usual format. I kept it clean. Because if you ever have to defend yourself later, normal behavior is a shield. At 10:55, Suri leaned toward me. "You're really going to HR?" "Looks like it." Her eyes narrowed. "Routine review my ass." I glanced around. The office felt louder, but not in a relaxed way. Conversations stopped when certain people walked by. 2 directors were whispering near the printers like they were hiding a match. "I'll be fine," I said, and the way my voice came out, steady, controlled, surprised even me. Suri lowered her voice. "If you want me to sit outside the room?" "No," I said quickly. "Don't get involved." She held my gaze. "Mason, what did she give you?" I didn't answer. Suri didn't press. She just swallowed and nodded once, like she understood enough. At 11, I walked to conference room 9. It was on the internal side of the floor, away from the windows. The kind of room used for performance conversations and quiet firings. No artwork, no warmth, just a table, 4 chairs, and a wall-mounted screen nobody ever turned on. The door was ajar. Inside sat 3 people. Darian, my manager. Kes Rowan from HR operations. Thin smile, neat hair, posture like she'd practiced being neutral. And Ilya Brent, general counsel. Not legal support, not compliance. The actual lawyer who protected the company when it decided to devour someone. Ilya didn't stand. He didn't smile. He watched me like I was a document he'd already skimmed and disliked. "Mason," Kes said brightly, "thanks for coming." I stepped in and shut the door behind me. "You said routine review?" Darian gestured to a chair. "Sit." I sat, keeping my hands visible on the table. Ilya slid a thin folder toward me, not the same one Callista used. This one was sterile, printed, corporate. The top page was titled, Employee Cooperation. Notice. Internal Inquiry. My eyes scanned the first paragraph and my throat tightened. It was worded like consent, but written as a trap. Kes kept her voice soft. "We're conducting an internal inquiry related to executive conduct and potential policy violations. You may have been exposed to certain interactions. We're simply documenting facts." Ilya spoke for the first time. "Answer the questions directly." I looked at him. "Am I being accused of something?" Ilya didn't blink. "Not if you cooperate." There it was again. The offer of safety, if I handed them what they wanted. Darian leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice friendly. "This doesn't need to be adversarial. We just need clarity." Kes nodded sympathetically. "Did the CEO give you anything in the last few days?" I didn't react. I kept my face flat. "No." Darian's smile thinned. "Come on." Ilya's eyes stayed on me. "Your calendar shows a meeting with her yesterday at 10. You were in the executive suite for 19 minutes. We have badge access." Kes tilted her head. "Was it a book?" My pulse spiked. Callista's exact cover story. I forced my breathing slower. "She wished me happy birthday." "And?" Ilya pressed, and that was it. Ilya's mouth curved into something that wasn't a smile. "Mason, don't make this harder." Kes slid a form across the table, a disclosure document with empty lines, and a box for item description. Darian said, "Just write it down. Then we can close this." I stared at the form. If I wrote anything, it became theirs. If I refused, it became non-cooperation. I chose a third option, one that kept me inside procedure. "I want this in writing," I said calmly. "All questions, all requests. And I want to know what policy I'm alleged to have violated." Ilya leaned back slightly, like he'd been waiting for me to say that. "You're not alleged to have violated anything," he said. "Yet." Darian looked irritated now. "Mason," I held up a hand. "If this is an inquiry, you can email me the questions. I'll respond through official channels." Kes's smile faltered. "That isn't necessary." Ilya's voice hardened. "Yes, it is. For you." He opened the folder again and took out another page. Temporary access restriction. My name, my employee ID, a list of systems. Some of them were tools I needed to do my job. Some of them were tools I didn't need, but had access to because my role involved audit support. Ilya tapped the page with one finger. We're applying temporary restrictions pending the inquiry. This is standard. It doesn't feel standard, I said. Ilya's eyes stayed dead calm. It will once you cooperate. Darian added, this protects everyone, including you. Kess's tone softened again like she was speaking to a child. Just tell us what she gave you. We log it, we verify it, then you go back to work. I looked at their faces and understood the shape of the room. HR wasn't leading this. Legal was. And legal wasn't asking. Legal was collecting. I kept my voice measured. She didn't give me anything. Ilya stared at me for a long moment. Then very slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said. Then we're done here. I blinked. That's it? Ilya closed the folder. For now. Darian stood and opened the door like yesterday never happened. Kess smiled again, but her eyes looked colder. Thank you for your time, she said. I walked out into the hallway and forced myself not to look like I was running. Back at my desk, I sat down and immediately tried to open the access request system. It spun. Then an error message popped up. You do not have permission to view this resource. I tried a second tool. Same thing. A third. Blocked. They hadn't just warned me. They'd already started stripping me. Suri appeared at my desk like she'd been waiting. How bad? I kept my voice low. They cut my access. Her face tightened. That's not routine. No, I said, staring at the screen. It's preparation. Because that's what you do before you remove someone. You make them helpless first. At 12:15, a company-wide email hit every inbox. Subject line, leadership update. I opened it, my fingers numb. It was 2 paragraphs of polite corporate fog. Effective immediately, Callista Vane will be stepping away from her role while the board conducts a review. Interim leadership will be appointed. Stepping away. Like she'd chosen it. Like she wasn't being pushed. I sat there reading the words over and over until they blurred. Then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. One message. No greeting. No explanation. Just 8 words. Don't trust Ilya. He's moving fast. And below it, one more sentence that made my skin go cold. Your badge will stop working today. My badge died at 1:47. Not at the lobby. Not at the parking gate. At the elevator. I tapped once. Red light. The doors stayed shut like I wasn't an employee anymore. Just a problem the building had learned to ignore. Behind me, a couple of interns pretended not to notice. In front of me, the security guard I'd seen outside the executive suite took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. He already knew the script. Mr. Hale, he said quietly, you'll need to sign out at the desk. I didn't resign, I said. I know, he replied, almost apologetic. It's an instruction. I didn't argue. Arguing gives them noise to blame you for later. I walked to the lobby desk, signed my name, and slid the pen back like it was evidence of my obedience. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another message. If they got your badge, they're about to get your narrative. Move. My throat went tight, but my mind got strangely clear, because that was the moment I finally understood what Callista had handed me on my birthday. Not a gift, a firebreak. I stepped outside, let the cold air hit my face, and kept walking until I was 2 blocks away from the building. I didn't go home. Home is where people just drop by. I went somewhere boring, an all-day co-working spot near a transit hub, full of freelancers and noise and nobody who cared who I was. I paid in cash. I sat in the back. Then I took out my notebook and the sealed drive case, still hidden in my jacket like a stone. The text file on the drive had said timing mattered, so I treated it like an incident response timeline. I opened the folder again on my offline laptop and pulled up Read First. This time I didn't skim. I followed it line by line. Step 1. Do not contact internal channels. Done. Step 2. Prepare a clean summary of what happened, with timestamps and names. Already done. Step 3. Send the summary and the evidence pack to the board channel. There was a method listed, an external intake address that didn't live on our company domain. A legal escrow mailbox managed by an outside firm, with a short code phrase required in the subject line. I stared at the phrase. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of phrase a CEO uses when she expects her own company to turn on her. Step 4. Do not send everything. Send the minimum that forces independent action. That was smart, because dumping a mountain of files gives them room to call it confusing. A clean, sharp sample forces a response. I opened board brief, restricted. It was concise, structured. No emotion, just a chain. Executive decisions overridden off record. Conflicts of interest masked through vendor routing. Legal interference in inquiries, retaliation protocol. Isolate employee, cut access, apply pressure. Rewrite record names were attached. Ilya Brent, Darian Koss, and one more name I didn't expect. Kess Rowan, HR operations. So HR wasn't a bystander. HR was a tool. My jaw tightened so hard it ached. I opened evidence pack. Inside were screenshots, exported logs, meeting artifacts, and a set of metadata summaries that looked like they'd been pulled straight from admin panels. Exact timestamps, request IDs, and approval chains. Not gossip. Mechanics. The kind of stuff that survives lawyers. One file stopped me cold. A memo draft, unsigned, titled Separation Narrative. My name was in it. It described me as disgruntled, seeking attention, attempting to leverage executive access. It even included a line about inappropriate acceptance of gifts. They had written my obituary while I was still alive. I sat there in a co-working space full of strangers and felt something in me snap, not into rage but into focus. Because once someone writes your narrative for you, you either take it back or you wear it forever. I built the message the way I build a risk report. Header. What happened? Body. Who did what, when, and how? Attachments. Only the pieces that made denial impossible. I attached the custody acknowledgement Callista had me sign, the board brief. The access restriction request tied to Ilya. The pre-written separation narrative. A small set of system logs showing access. Friction, restriction timing, and the invite accepted on my behalf. Then I wrote a short line at the top. I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to verify the records before they are altered. I sent it to the external escrow address with the code phrase. Then I waited exactly long enough to confirm delivery. My phone buzzed again, this time from an email notification. A reply. Not from a board member directly. From a partner at an outside firm. Subject line, receipt confirmed. Preserve all materials. The message was short. Do not return to the office. Do not communicate with employees about this. We will contact you through this channel. Your materials are being placed under legal hold. Legal hold. That meant someone outside the company had just put a hand around the throat of the story. And Ilya wouldn't like that. I closed my laptop and sat still, letting the adrenaline settle. Because the next move was obvious. If Ilya couldn't control my access, he'd try to control me. An hour later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again, then again. Then I got a text, this time with a name attached, like intimidation dressed as professionalism. Darian Koss. Mason, we need to talk. You're making a mistake. I stared at it. Then another message. Come back in. We can fix this quietly. Quietly. That word was a trap. Quietly is where things disappear. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notes and added, Darian contact attempt, post escrow. 2 minutes later, another text, different tone. Security is concerned about company property in your possession. Company property. They were trying to label the drive as stolen, which meant they didn't know where it was anymore. Good. My email pinged again. Same outside firm. This time, an instruction. We are initiating an independent review. You will receive a call from our investigator. Verify their passphrase before speaking. So Callista had built a verification step into her plan. Of course she did. 5 minutes later, I got a call from a block number. I answered. A calm voice, female, professional. This is Rhea Mortimer with Mortimer & Klein. Before we talk, you need to confirm the passphrase. I glanced at the text file. My voice stayed level. Black glass. Confirmed, she said. Mason, I'm going to ask you 3 things. Keep it factual. She asked, where were you when the CEO gave you the item? Who else could corroborate you were called into the suite? Did anyone threaten you directly? I answered like I was on the stand. Then she said, good. Last question. Do you still have access to any internal systems? No. They restricted me. Expected, she replied. Do not attempt to regain access. We already issued a hold. Any changes they make now become part of the record. I swallowed. What happens next? There was a pause, not dramatic, just procedural. Next, Rhea said, we remove the people who are trying to remove you. My skin prickled, because that was the first time anyone said it out loud. Not, we'll look into it. Not, we'll review. Remove. I thanked her, hung up, and sat back. And that's when the building across the street reflected something I didn't expect. A black SUV pulling up to my office tower. 2 security supervisors stepping out. Internal, not contractors. Then through the glass doors, a familiar figure in a dark blazer. Ilya Brent, moving fast. He walked in like a man who still believed the building belonged to him. He walked out 15 minutes later, not alone. 2 people flanked him. One from corporate security, one I didn't recognize, wearing the kind of calm you only see in outside counsel. Ilya's face wasn't angry. It was stunned, like the floor had shifted under rules he thought he owned. My phone buzzed one last time. From the outside firm. Do not respond to anyone internally. You did the right thing. Stay available. I stared at that message until my eyes burned, because the chaos wasn't over yet. But for the first time since my birthday, the chaos wasn't aimed only at me. And I knew Ilya would have one final move left. One last attempt to make sure I didn't get the clean ending. So I did what I should have done from the beginning. I made sure I had a witness. I called Suri on my personal phone from a quiet corner of the co-working space and told her only one thing. If you get asked about me, you say you saw nothing, and you say nothing without a lawyer. She went silent. Then she whispered, Mason, what did you start? I looked at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. Something cold and steady looked back. I stopped it, I said, before it buried me. When someone tries to handle this quietly, treat it like containment, not help. Keep your timeline factual. Times, names, exact phrases. Use an external documented channel when internal channels are compromised. And never fight for access once a legal hold is active. You let the hold do the damage for you. The next 2 days felt unreal in the most ordinary way. No explosions, no shouting in hallways. Just silence. Corporate silence, where everyone knows something happened, but no one knows which version is safe to repeat. I stayed out of the office like the outside firm instructed. I didn't post anything. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't even answer Darian's calls when they switched from threatening to pleading. I kept doing the same 3 things on loop. I wrote down every contact attempt. I saved every voicemail. I kept my timeline clean. On Friday morning, I got an email from the outside firm with a single sentence. The board committee will meet you off-site at noon. The location was a small conference suite in a downtown law office. the kind with neutral art and chairs that are comfortable on purpose. When I arrived, a receptionist handed me a visitor badge and pointed me to a room with a glass pitcher of water and a stack of tissues on the table. That's when it hit me. They weren't treating me like a troublemaker, they were treating me like a witness. A few minutes later, Rhea Mortimer walked in with two people I didn't recognize. One older man with a quiet, exhausted face, and a woman whose posture screamed, "Boardroom." Rhea introduced them without ceremony. "This is the independent committee chair and a member of the board. Thank you for coming, Mason." I nodded, kept my hands on the table, and let them lead. The board member opened a thin notebook. "We are going to ask you to confirm a sequence of events. We are not asking for opinions. We are asking for facts." That was the first time in days I felt my lungs work normally. They went through my timeline the way you'd go through an incident report. The meeting with Callista, the custody acknowledgement, Darian's first approach, the HR invite accepted on my behalf, Ilya's access restriction request, the badge deactivation, the separation narrative draft. When they asked about the drive, I didn't hand it over right away. I watched their faces first. Then I said, "I have it secured. I can provide it through counsel under chain of custody?" The committee chair nodded once, like he'd been hoping I'd say that. "Good." Rhea slid a document toward me. It wasn't a confession, it wasn't a trap. It was a preservation agreement, formalizing what I'd already done and binding them to protect my role as a witness. I signed, and only then did Rhea take the drive. Not directly, but sealed, logged, witnessed. Like this was evidence in a case, not a birthday present. After that, the room got quieter. The board member leaned forward. "We have one question that matters. Why did the CEO choose you?" I didn't pretend to know her motives beyond what she wrote. Because she needed someone ordinary enough to be overlooked, but close enough to procedures to be believed. The committee chair exhaled slowly. That matches what we're seeing. Rhea didn't smile, but her tone softened a fraction. They tried to move fast, too fast. That's what exposed them. I swallowed. What happens to me? The board member looked me in the eye. Your access will be restored under supervision. Your status will be protected, and you will not be retaliated against for cooperating with an independent inquiry. It sounded like policy language, but coming from the board, it sounded like a shield. I left the law office feeling lighter, then immediately hated myself for it, because I knew how corporate stories usually end. They don't end with justice. They end with people quietly transferred and problems quietly renamed. So I waited for the part where they tried to make this disappear. It didn't disappear. On Monday morning, I got a calendar invite from a domain I'd never seen used for internal meetings. Board committee update, attendance required. When I joined, there were 6 faces on the call. Rhea, 2 board members, an outside investigator, and Callista Vane. She looked tired for the first time since I'd known her. Not messy tired, not crying tired, just human. "Mason," she said, and there was something in her voice that didn't belong in executive suites. "Thank you." I didn't know what to do with that, so I did what I'd done the whole time. I stayed factual. They tried to force me to disclose the item through HR. Callista nodded. I expected that. One of the board members spoke. "We are not here to debate. We are here to close this." Then they did something I didn't expect. They named outcomes. Ilya Brent was removed effective immediately and barred from representing the company in any capacity going forward. His access was terminated under supervision, and he was under investigation for interference and misuse of legal authority. Darian Koss was placed on administrative leave pending a disciplinary process tied to retaliation and policy manipulation. The board member didn't say fired, but they didn't need to. Kess Rowan was suspended, and HR operations was being audited by outside counsel to determine how far the retaliation protocol reached. Then the board member looked at me. "Mason," she said, "your separation narrative was drafted before any inquiry concluded. That is unacceptable. You will receive a written statement clearing you of wrongdoing, and your personnel file will be sealed from internal edits without oversight." My throat tightened. "So I'm not terminated," Ria answered, calm. "You were never legally terminated. You were isolated. There's a difference." Callista's camera stayed on me. "I'm sorry," she said, and I could tell that sentence cost her something. "You weren't supposed to become collateral." I stared at her. "Then why give it to me?" Callista didn't flinch, because they were already rewriting everything around me. If I kept it, it would be framed as self-serving. If I gave it to someone with less power, it would be stolen quietly. I needed a custodian who would follow procedure even when scared. That was the closest thing to trust I'd ever heard from someone like her. The board member cleared her throat. "One more point. Callista has agreed to step down permanently." I felt my eyebrows rise. Callista didn't look surprised. "That was always the cost," she said. "I didn't build this company to become another story it tells itself." There was a pause, heavy and final. Then Ria added the line that closed the loop in my chest. "The record will reflect what occurred, including the attempted retaliation and the interference. That is not optional." The call ended. I sat there alone in my kitchen, staring at my blank screen, waiting for the panic to return. It didn't, because this time, the silence felt different. It felt like something had actually been decided. 2 days later, I walked back into the building. My badge worked. The lobby guard didn't avoid my eyes. He nodded like he'd been waiting to see which version of me showed up. When I reached my desk, my access was restored, but not exactly as before. There were new safeguards, new approvals, new audit trails. It was annoying, and it was beautiful, because it meant someone had learned the right lesson. Systems should not depend on trust. Suri appeared beside my desk like she'd been holding her breath for a week. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask what happened. She just said quietly, "You're back?" "Yeah," I said. She looked around, then leaned in. "Is it over?" I thought about Ilya's face when he walked out flanked, about Darian's text turning desperate, about the separation narrative that never got to become my obituary. "It's over," I said, "and it's on record." Later that afternoon, I got a final email from the board committee, a formal letter clearing me, a retention bonus in writing, and an offer to move into a newly created role, Process Integrity Liaison, reporting to an oversight function that didn't sit under legal or HR. It wasn't a victory parade, it was control. And on a quiet Friday evening, I opened my kitchen drawer and realized something simple. The drive was gone. The fear was gone, but the habit stayed, the habit of documenting, the habit of asking, who benefits from this narrative? On my next birthday, no one gave me a black box. Suri left a cupcake on my desk. Someone from finance wrote a corny message in the team chat. The office moved on like offices do, and that was the point. Because the best ending wasn't revenge that makes a scene. It was the kind of ending where the truth survives. The people who tried to bury it lose their leverage, and you get to walk back into your life without lowering your eyes. What do you think about this case? Comment. Stories at work. Have you ever been in a situation where a company tried to rewrite your reputation through HR and legal instead of admitting there was a problem in their processes? What would you do in my place? Hand everything over quietly and politely? Or document the facts with a timeline, emails, logs, and a chain of decisions before it became a point of no return? If you're into stories where calm strategy and evidence win, hit like and subscribe. There's more corporate drama and justice ahead.